Did you know that annual immigration to Canada amounts for almost 500,000 people? That is one of the highest rates of immigration of any country on the globe. As of 2023, there were more than 8 million immigrants with permanent residence living in Canada. That accounts for roughly 20% of the entire population of Canada. That's fucking crazy, actually, right?
You think that's crazy? Let's talk about Toronto.
Okay.
The large urban center of Toronto has the largest proportion of immigrants overall. In 2021, close to half, 46.6% of the population living in Toronto were immigrants.
This is one of the things that attracted us to the city in the first place. We want to live somewhere where we can share the experiences of people from around the world. You know, I've spent so long living in kind of this isolated rich white person bubble here in Missouri that I'm definitely ready for a change. In 2025, our family is going to represent 3 of those immigrants. And today on the Love It or Leave It podcast, we are going to be talking about specifically our path to Canada.
If you're new to the podcast, allow me to introduce ourselves. We are a queer and trans family of 3 currently living in Missouri, and we're planning our move to Toronto. Why? Missouri kind of sucks for families like ours right now. So we are packing up, crossing the border, and we're sharing our whole journey along the way on this podcast. Someday, this podcast might become us talking about all the different flavors of poutine we've tried, but right now, it's pretty much talking about paperwork.
Do you think they have gluten-free, dairy-free poutine?
Yes.
Ever since people in our community found out that we indeed were going to immigrate to Canada, definitely the most common question that we get is, how? Because it's something that comes up a lot, but once you actually get down to the process of going across the border, becoming a resident, etc., then it starts to get kind of complicated, and I would say most Americans have no idea how this works.
Immigration is not easy. We wanted an expert to talk us through the process, and so they walked us through immigration through the lens of express entry, which is essentially how you pursue permanent residency into Canada. And it's a points-based system. And when we did the little calculation on ourselves, we don't look very good on paper. We don't get a lot of points. And honestly, for a moment, I had a rough night. I thought that was kind of the end of the conversation for us.
It didn't sit right, though, because it really does seem like we're appropriate candidates for immigration to lots of countries. Canada just seems like a really good fit. And so when we walked away from that meeting, rejected essentially, it didn't
Not encouraged. We were not encouraged in that meeting.
I also wasn't ready to give up because it kind of didn't make sense to me. Do you remember during the meeting when the guy that we were talking to started delving into my creative projects, thinking that we might find a path to Canada through my content creation? I do remember thinking like, bro, you are not on the right track. This is not what Canada wants from us.
We're like, by the way, like I run a really successful business of my own and we can do it anywhere. Is there anything to do there? He's like, oh, well, yeah, you know, there's like business programs and stuff. It was like, well, that's probably what we should do. But he wasn't the guy.
So we were like, all right, it's not going to happen through this, at least not right away. So eventually we decided to get a second opinion and focus on immigration through Lori's business. And because Lori is a business owner, it opened up a bunch of new paths for us, thank goodness. And we found the right people to talk to.
The short answer to people's question of how are you getting into Canada, it's like, well, we hired a law firm. And again, privilege. That's not cheap. If you're going to spend your money on anything, I think you should spend it on the health and well-being of your family. So for us, that's worth it. But yes, all in on this first phase of legal fees has been about $20,000 US. We ended up working with the attorney that we did the initial consultation with. She walked us through multiple paths, and it was just a completely different tone of meeting. She's like, yeah, absolutely. You have multiple paths to coming into Canada. Let's talk about what the best fit is. The path we're taking gets us in on initially a temporary work visa, and then in a year, we'll start applying for permanent residency through the express entry pathway. The process of establishing my business in Canada, working in Canada, being in Canada, we're just going to start looking a lot better on paper a year from now. So first, let's talk about the work programs that are available, and then we'll talk about what applying for permanent residency looks like, because that's the path a lot of people jump straight to. And this is by no means an exhaustive list of ways to get into Canada. These are just the ones that were presented to us.
The reason that we're doing this business immigration path is because it puts us into Canada, living there and working there, which scores us a tremendous amount of points. So ultimately, we're really just trying to get the points up by finding this path through business immigration. It wouldn't necessarily be our first choice. If we scored really well on express entry straight out of the gate, of course, but that's the route we would go. That's the most direct path.
It's probably a way cheaper path, too.
No doubt, because that 20,000 American, that's just legal fees, right?
Absolutely. Even going through express entry, there will be some fees. I don't have an exact breakdown of that, but you're talking multiple hundreds, maybe into the thousands or two, but certainly not what we're talking about when it comes to legal fees.
Eventually, the program that we all realized was the best fit is called the C11 Entrepreneur Work Permit. It's a provision that was created under the International Mobility Program, IMP, and it allows foreign entrepreneurs and investors to obtain a work permit in Canada as self-employed individuals. The initial work permit is issued for a period of 2 years, and that can be extended several times, provided that your business in Canada is active and profitable and more or less follows the business plan that you laid out as a pitch to the Canadian government.
Our hope is that we'll start applying for permanent residency within a year and be able to pursue that path. And then at that point, you kind of don't care about extending your temporary work visa anymore. It's like, my company can just go in the shitter. I'm in. Haha. But if we haven't established permanent residency by the time my 2-year work permit is up, then I'll have to jump through some hoops and be like, no, I'm still trying. Look at all this work I've done. Look at how much progress I've made. And, hope that they just extend the work permit again. There are some other options that were brought to us by our attorney. Another one is called the Provincial Nominee Program. That is available only in British Columbia, Alberta, and Nova Scotia. They offer entrepreneurs who are willing to invest in and manage a business in those provinces a path to permanent residency. Nova Scotia was highlighted as one of the easier territories to go into because it doesn't require a letter of support from an economic development office. We didn't want to live in Nova Scotia. We thought potentially British Columbia because Vancouver is in British Columbia and we hear good things. Ultimately, we knew we'd prefer Toronto, so we chose a path that would let us immediately establish in Toronto. It's also nice because our path lets us move around Canada. If we did get to Toronto, we're like, this city's not for us, let's go over here. We could do that. If you do a provincial nominee program, you have to commit to residing in that province for at least 2 to 3 years.
Another business path to immigration is called the SUV, which is the Startup Visa Program. And just as an aside, I love how Canada just does not give a fuck with its initialisms and acronyms.
Nope. If it's taken, they don't care. They're like, that's what it is, so that's what we're calling it.
We have IMP, IMP. As soon as we get to Canada, we have to register for our social identification numbers, SIN.
Whole new world of acronyms.
The SUV program is intended for entrepreneurs with innovative and scalable business ideas supported by a designated organization. So I think the English translation of that is you need to have a successful, profitable, growing business where you're able to show financial investment. Do you think I'm interpreting that right?
I think so. You need to have an idea, convince people it's good enough, but also be like, I'm backing this up with at least $150,000 Canadian.
Right. I forgot that this was the one that requires the minimum investment of 150 grand. And I wonder about the red tape of this one. Because, like, if you just come up with 150 grand, are they going to ask you that many questions? I don't really know. This one seems like the ticket price to Canada almost.
Sure. And there are some countries that just have a ticket price. They're like, how much money you got? Come on in. Canada's not that overt about it.
There were a number of options that were available to us. And if none of these other ones worked out, we had just a Hail Mary that we were pretty sure would work, but would be a lot less convenient.
The fact that we're moving into Canada on the strength of my business is like deeply unsettling to a core part of me. So there's one part of me that every time we talk to the attorney, I was like, okay, so you're saying we'll get to stay if my business is successful. But what if it's not? I need a backup plan. And indeed, there is a backup plan. Our Hail Mary would be the humanitarian and compassionate grounds in Canada. And that's essentially if my business goes kaput and they're like, nah, we're not going to renew your temporary work visa and you're not a candidate for permanent residency, we can raise our hand and be like, you can't send us back because it will be mean. Our kiddo is thriving here. She needs to be here. If you send her back, it's awful over there. And that's a legit claim. And our attorney even agreed. She's like, yes, you absolutely could. I just kind of stumbled into owning my own company. My temperament would prefer a 9-to-5 with someone giving me health insurance. I had completely planned to die working for the man. And my story is like a lot of other people's stories, which is I got laid off and just started working for myself to make ends meet in between what I thought was going to be your kind of standard jobs. But working for myself ended up working out for me so well that it never made sense to go back to applying for your standard job type jobs where they give you all the health insurance and the 401ks and stuff like that. So here I am 8 years later, self-employed, like my own business owner. It sounds very impressive, but I never wanted to do any of it. I live in a land where I think it's going to come crashing down on me at any given moment.
One of the early things that was explained to us was regardless of our path across the border, once we're in Canada, we're going to enjoy a protection that is unheard of right now. So even if everything that we do fails, chances are we would be able to stay. I can't tell you exactly how, only that we've been reassured by so many people that we're not going to get booted.
Right. Once I get there, I'm not letting anybody kick me out. I'm going to go boneless. Once I'm in, I will try every legal path possible. And once you ignite one of them, it takes so long for it to work through the system that meanwhile, you're spending years living in Canada. But there is just this doomsday part of my brain that is just always planning for the worst. And even in the worst case scenario, there are going to be options.
Does this feel like imposter syndrome?
In what way, Clover?
I'm no expert, but based on the things that I've read about imposter syndrome, it's more common with women because I think of internalized misogyny.
Oh, are you talking about the fact that I always think my business will fail?
Right, like no matter how successful you become and how many people reassure you that you are indeed one of or the best person that has occupied this role professionally in this profession, you have this latent insecurity that, you know, I'm aware of because we talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if it would qualify technically as imposter syndrome because I actually do think I'm awesome. So I'm not sure exactly how you'd categorize it. I don't think I'm an imposter. I don't know what you'd call it. There's some of that in there, yes. I mean, it's hard to feel deserving of really good things.
That sounds like the beginning of a discussion.
It's probably not for this podcast. I think I'm awesome, and I think my clients get value from what I do. I get spooked easily by like macroeconomics and client uncertainty. And to some extent, this is always the case. The business that gives you the 401k and the health insurance can always tank too. They can lay you off. There's really no more security in those types of jobs than what I do. When you have like clients get rid of you for something that's completely out of your control, which happens all the time. They're just like, oh gosh, our budget shifted and we can't afford you anymore. It's jarring. It's like, oh shit, this isn't even in my control. I can do my job so well and somebody else might shit the bed and then all of a sudden I'm not making money. So these things weigh on me.
I mean, you're the only earner in this family, really. I make a little money off of content creation, but not much. Most of this is coming from you. So if it stopped, we would have to change something rather dramatically.
Oh, yes.
And given that that's the case, do you think that all breadwinners feel this way in our culture? This is a responsibility placed typically on men. Maybe they do feel this, but culturally it's just not encouraged to share.
They just come home and smack their kids. That's how they cope. They don't talk about it. They just get smacky.
Sadly, yeah, I think that's how it goes sometimes.
There's totally breadwinner pressure. I feel it, like in the idea that if it crumbles, that like I'm not just letting myself down, you know? This is so not what this podcast was going to be about.
We have almost all of the necessary paperwork and we're ready to go. Right now, it's just like a logistic nightmare.
Oh, I have plenty to say about our logistic nightmare. We have 2 Missouri houses full of things that we're going to move into a not small but not gigantic place into Toronto. So there is a lot of moving of things, downsizing of things. We weren't just paying an attorney to tell us which program to do. The money went to a lot of paperwork on their end. We worked with this attorney to put together a packet that we had to print it out at some point. It was like 2 inches thick. And a lot of it's just personal documents showing what you look like on paper in the US, but then a huge part of it was actually establishing my business in Canada. So this attorney jumped through all the hoops to legally create a business for me in Canada, and that's put together. I worked with another consultant of hers who wrote a business plan, and essentially it was just documenting what I do here in the US and putting it together as a, here's what I'm going to do in Canada. So this person interviewed me and then wrote up a nice little business plan. So there was a lot of paperwork happening behind the scenes. I think when we initially spoke to our attorney, we're like, how fast does this go? She's like, oh, like 6-7 months. And we're like, well, what if we want it to go faster? She's like, well, if you move fast, we can move fast. That's like someone took a glove off and slapped me in the face. And I'm like, oh, I will show you fast. And I'm not saying it's a healthy trait that I have. It's like people benefit from it. Everyone praises me for it, and I feed on their praise. She took a couple of weeks to do the rest of the paperwork. We went over it together. I'm like, yep, this all looks good. And then what was interesting to me was you have a few options for actually submitting it. You can apply online. You just upload it, send it away. They'll review it in 2 months, get back to you. The fastest option is to just load your paperwork up in your arms and walk to the border and essentially be like, I want to file right here for my work visa. That can be like a long process of sitting at the border while people actually like review all your stuff and make a determination. It's instantaneous, but there's an interim way that is the right fit for us, and that is you send all your paperwork off to a legal department and they review it initially. Now, they don't give you a firm answer, but they give you an opinion letter. And if you get a positive opinion letter, it's essentially this legal department saying, we looked at all your shit, we think you're probably good. And that's it. You get this letter and then you go to the border. In my case, I flew into Pearson Airport in Toronto, and then you walk in with your opinion letter and all your paperwork and you're like, I want my work visa. Someone already said I should get one. And my attorney prepped me for potential doomsday scenarios. Apparently there is one immigration agent at the Pearson Airport who's given clients a rough go in the past. She's like, in the very rare case that you get a hostile immigration agent, Here's what you do. You don't freak out. You can either just walk away and we'll apply online, or if they seem somewhat reasonable, you can say, hey, can I call my attorney? She walked me through all this, and it's like hyping the process up in my head. I'm like, oh my God, this might be intense. It was so not intense. I walked off the flight, and the most polite people on the planet ushered me in and pointed me through the door that said immigration. And then I spoke to the dreamiest human being on the planet and gave him all my paperwork. And he looked at it for a few minutes and stamped some things and was like, here's your work permit. And I was like, cool. It was weird, though. It was weird walking into an office that said immigration.
Why do you think that's weird? Do you think it's because we grew up having this idea of manifest destiny hammered into us?
Yeah.
You're American. People immigrate to us, not the other way around.
That's exactly it. We've been fed this line of, we're doing them a favor. You're welcome. Why would you leave? Everyone else is trying to get here. It flies in the face of the story we've been told our entire lives.
The whole concept of express entry really took me a minute to grasp because it's such a simple system. I remember the first time somebody referred to it as a human capital system. Makes me feel like cattle.
It does.
It's interesting to me that no matter which one of these programs that you participate in, ultimately, the final path to permanent residency in Canada is the express entry program. You are going to have to score enough points on this very simple scale for the Canadian government to be like, come on in.
Let's talk about the things that score you points in express entry. And again, this isn't exhaustive, but these are some of the main criteria. And one of the big ones first is age.
That doesn't feel good, does it?
It doesn't, because I don't think we score very well here.
No, that's not a positive for us.
We could score worse. That's a pretty direct correlation there. And it's understandable. The older you get, the sicker and more expensive you get for a country that's paying for your health care, essentially, and the less working years you have. So, if you're a retiree coming into Canada, you're not much use to them. Taking stock of the point-based system feels icky in a way, even though it's completely understandable.
I can rationalize it, but you're right. It's just creepy. I mean, they call it a human capital system, and there's like 8-ish things on this list. You gotta be good at most of them, or Canada's just like, forget it.
The age thing is particularly funny because it's like, fine, if you don't score well over here because you haven't had experience, at least you're young and we're going to like get our money's worth out of you because you're going to keep pouring into the system for longer than this person over here.
Do you think that's the justification, is that old people are a burden? Because I'm thinking about a young person coming into Canada with their whole life ahead of them, just wreaking havoc on their public support system for far longer than oldie Han would.
It's true, but young people are really shitty at taking care of themselves and seeing doctors and things like that. They're just living on Skittles and Bud Light.
This sounds like a really American point of view, and we're talking about Canada.
It's true. Yeah, it might be.
Are young people in Canada good at taking care of themselves because it's accessible?
It's true. I have no idea. We've lived through the utter collapse of employer-provided health insurance. There was this brief shining moment in our lives when we were both employed full-time by employers who paid for all of our health insurance. And I had an HMO, and people always mocked HMOs, I think, because they limited the doctors you could go to. But I had my most expensive run through the healthcare system ever during that HMO. I had a bicycle accident and broke my jaw, and there was all sorts of surgeries and procedures and stuff like that. I paid nothing. And if I had had that accident 5 years later, I would have gone bankrupt. Truly. Just, it was that dramatic. All of a sudden, employers could not cover people's health insurance, and you started paying in more on it, and then it just borderline vanished. It's kind of like how we sit in the generation that very well remembers absolutely no internet.
Yeah, when I was a kid, there was no such thing. And I can tell you all kinds of stories about not having the internet and the lengths we went to obtain information.
Right. And I'm not going to say that healthcare in the United States was good in our life, but we witnessed the collapse. We saw it go from to, oh, no. It will be interesting to get back to a country where that's not the case. Well, that's age. Another thing they care about is level of education. That's kind of akin to paying your way into.
Oh, for sure. Level of education is not really a function of ability. It's a function of money. In this country, anyway, and I think maybe a lot of places.
There are also skilled trade programs. So you get points for being a college graduate, you get points for an advanced degree, but you could also just have a specialized trade, electricians, plumbers.
I assume the trades that they welcome at any given time have to do with the available job force in Canada and the relative need for it.
Do they welcome teachers in?
Well, that's a separate program, I think,
Yeah.
That
Gotcha.
we're not going to talk about because I don't know jack shit about it, but I did run across it.
We don't know all the programs. We only know the ones that were like vaguely in line with what we could bring to the table. Another way to look really good on paper for express entry, English and French proficiency.
Is it well known that Canada has 2 official languages, French and English? If it's not, they do. French really is not spoken throughout Canada. It's primarily in Quebec. But at the same time, throughout Canada, being that they have 2 official languages, announcements are made in English and French. All signs are in English and French. And so knowing both languages really elevates you in the estimation of Canada.
And if you're not going to know both, at least speak one really well. And they don't just take your word for it. If you want points for English or French proficiency, they actually test you. And I think if you were to learn French and test passably, that's a crap ton of points. So we have definitely considered and might even have you learn French because of the 2 of us, there is really no doubt that you are more tuned to absorbing new languages. It's just not in my skill set.
I know you have long said that about yourself. I'm not sure that I've ever actually seen that in action.
I feel like you have more of an interest in the process of learning a language. I would really love to know another language, but I really would prefer someone to just be able to like put a chip in my brain and download it.
Work experience is a really big one too. And it's funny because it feels like a loophole. It's totally not.
Right.
It's actually relatively simple to obtain a work visa compared to obtaining permanent residency. So if you go work in Canada for like any length of time, that scores you a huge amount of points on the express entry scale.
Right. Kind of related, but a job offer in Canada gets you a lot of points as well. And the consultant pointed out to us, you don't actually have to accept the job.
Right. I thought that was really funny.
It just has to be open to you. If you can show a letter showing that you have a job offer in Canada, you'll just get those points, even if you're like, fuck that job, I'm not doing it.
If you have relatives living in Canada, this is another big one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the first things people ask. Do you know anyone living in Canada? Do you have relatives? I'm like, my aunt traveled to Canada like a few times.
I visited Canada in the 5th grade, and they were like, nah, that doesn't count.
But they're polite about it.
I think maybe it's living or deceased, too. I think if you can show that you have ancestry in Canada, I wonder how far back you can go and if that's a worthwhile thing to pursue to see if any of your family came from there. Life update. We have a move-in date, which is coming right up. We signed a lease. We know where we're going to live, when we're going to move there. Things are happening pretty fast at this point. Lori has her work permit in hand, which means that me and the kiddo can get the paperwork that we need. And one of the first things that we do is obtain our SIN numbers, our social identification numbers, which allows us to basically do all of the social support stuff in Canada, including public schools and healthcare and so on. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing this podcast from Canada instead of the U.S.
Or maybe one of us will be in Canada and one of us will be in the U.S. I don't know. We have not figured out the logistics yet.
If you know anybody else who might be interested in our story, it would be really cool if you would share a link with them. We'll see you in the next one.